Of Metzia Daf Tzadi Daled and Tzadi Hey. Your things and you in Ba'alav more, which is going to be a Psichet Perek HaShoel, an opening to the 8th Perek of Metzia, the Perek HaShoel, that starts dealing with the laws of borrowing. We've dealt with the four Shomrim, different forms of guardianship that there are: paid guardianship, voluntary guardianship, rental, and now we deal with the Shoel, a borrower. He's also a guardian, he's also a Shomer. And they're divided into really two sections. The Shomer Chinam and the Shomer Sachar are both guardians who don't have the right to use the item that they're guarding. But the Socher and the Shoel are allowed to use what they're guarding. In fact, they're guarding it in order to be able to use it, the borrower and the renter. And we focus on the borrower at this point, also the renter. And what we learn is a profound, invisible but indelible connection between a person and their belongings, which we'll understand here. It starts with the posuk of the Shoel. We've got two psukim, we've got two verses in the Torah in Shemot chapter 22, 13 and 14. The two verses that deal with the Shoel. If a person borrows something from his friend and it breaks or it dies, it's beyond his control. But alav eini more, provided the owner is not with him, shalem yeshalem, he's responsible to pay. Even though he wasn't complicit in the loss, it just happened, he's responsible even for that. Even for an onus, even for something beyond his control, a shoel, a borrower, is responsible for that. The only thing a borrower is not responsible for is meita machmat malachato, if he used it the way he was intending to use it, meant to be using it, and its very use caused it to collapse. Then he can say, that's not what I borrowed. I borrowed something to use. This wasn't an item that I borrowed. However, im ba'alav imo, if the owner is with the item, lo yeshalem, then even in such a case he doesn't have to pay. Even if there's a case of something happening beyond his control, im sachirhu bas bischaro. However, if he's a sachir, or rather, if the animal is a sachir, if the animal, as Rashi in the Chazal Gemara learns it here, if the animal is a rented animal, not a borrowed animal, then it's different. His responsibilities are far less because he's paying to rent it, so he has less responsibilities. That last part we'll deal with separately, but the important part is this din of im ba'alav imo. It's a strange halacha that if the owner is there, then the shoel is patur, the shoel is free. Although the shoel, the borrower, has enormous responsibility towards the lender of the item, but if ba'alav imo, what does ba'alav imo mean? We'll see in the Gemara. The Perek starts off with hashoel et hapara, a person borrows a cow. V'sha'al ba'aleh ha'ima, and he borrows the owner too. He says, you come and milk the cow for me. I want to borrow your cow, and if you'll help me milk it, I don't know how to milk cows. Or sachar ba'aleh ha'ima, he said, I'll hire you to milk the cow. If he first hired the owner, or borrowed the owner, and then borrowed the item, patur. So it has to be that way around. The owner must have been engaged before or at the same time as the item is borrowed. Shene'emar im ba'alav imo lo yeshalem, and quotes the pasuk. Two amazing halachot in the Gemara. The one is Pshia b'va'alim. What is the case if he was careless? So understand, you've got the owners with you, but I borrow your cow. I ask you to help me milk it, and then I do something stupid that causes the cow to die. There's a loose beam, and I move it around, and it falls on the cow, and kills it. I shouldn't have been doing that when the cow was underneath it. Would I be patur? Would I be free just because the owner is there? Ravina and Rav Acha, at the end of the period of the Gemara, discuss this matter and disagree on it. And the Rif says, Whenever Rav Acha and Ravina argue, says the Rif, we go according to the view, the lighter view for the muhzak, for whoever is holding the money, the defendant, the person who is holding the money from whom it is being claimed, will go the lighter view, which means in this case we would hold that if the owner is there, the shoel does not have to pay. That's how we hold la halacha according to the Rif, and the Rambam and other poskim follow that route. Second strange din, so that's a strange din, that even if I'm a posheya, and we're going to see that the Rambam regards pshia as mazik. The Rambam says when you're careless with something you should have been looking after, it's as if you actually damaged it biyadayim, as if you physically damaged it. It's not just that you were careless in your responsibilities. It's as if you took an axe and you destroyed it yourself. If that's the case, what difference does it make if the owner is there or the owner isn't there? In either case, probably you should surely be chayev. So that's the one strange halacha. The second one is hayaymo b'shat sheila. The Gemara says on Tzadihei Amud Beis, if he was there at the time of engagement, in other words, when I borrowed the cow, I already had the owner working for me, whether voluntarily or for fee. It doesn't matter if he was there when the cow dies. So I borrow the owner, he's going to help me milk the cows, but during the interval when the cows aren't being milked, he's sitting in the canteen on his cell phone, he's going through his emails, the cow is in the shed, and the beam falls down on the cow because I've been messing, because I was careless. The beam falls, he's nowhere near the place, he didn't even see it happen. Nevertheless, in that case, whatever the case, he's got to be there at the time of borrowing. It doesn't matter if he's there at the time of the damage. That also just doesn't make sense. So I understand you might think if he's there at the time of the damage, he can intervene. He can say, what are you doing? This loose beam over there, it's going to damage my cow, get rid of it. So I understand that if the owner is present at the time of the damage, the borrower is less responsible because the owner is present and the owner is capable of intervening. I can understand that, and that's how the Sefer Chinuch tries to explain this halacha. But in that case, why when he's not present? Why when the owner is nowhere to be seen? So the Minchas Chinuch says because the Torah doesn't want to get into, is he there, isn't he there, how close does he have to be? The Torah just makes a general law and covers everything, and it doesn't get into grey areas, which is very hard, very, very difficult. It doesn't sit comfortably. We're still left with this enormous question mark. Why would it be that simply because when I borrowed your cow, you were in my employ or volunteering to help me, from that time onwards, I'm free from all the obligations of a shomer. I don't have the obligations of a guardian. Why? Even if you're operating in a different part of my yard, you're in a different business, you might be far away, it doesn't matter. Since contractually you're working with me, the responsibility doesn't come onto the shoulders of the shomer, of the borrower in this case. Why would that be? It just doesn't seem to make any rational sense. The Ravid asks a question on the Rambam. I told you that the Rambam holds that pshia is like mazik. If you're careless, it's not just that you didn't do what you should have done. Pshia is damaging. You've damaged, it's an active, it's not passive. We think of pshia as passive, and the simple understanding of pshia, of carelessness, is it could be something passive. You didn't fix something that should have been fixed. That's pshia, that's passive damage. But the Rambam says it's damage. It's like mazik. You're actually damaging. Asks the Ravid, if pshia is mazik, why would pshia be patur for a shomer, for a shoel, for example, when the bailim is present, when the owner is there? Why would that free him? If the owner is present and I take an axe and I chop his item into pieces, of course I'm obligated. The fact that he's there doesn't mean that I'm not obligated for actions that I've done. And if pshia is considered active, not passive, why wouldn't it work just as well when the owner is present? So we've got all these difficulties to try and understand this halachat. We're not only trying to understand a Mishnah and a Gemara, although they make it more difficult. It's a pasuk in the Torah, it's a verse in the Torah that's very difficult to understand. So if it's a verse in the Torah that's difficult to understand, let's go to the Mefarshim of the Torah. So we have the Sforno, and the Sforno says, you know that the Sforno is one of my favorites whenever there's a conceptual idea that needs to be understood in the Chumash. The Sforno says an amazing thing. Shestam mashil bekiruv da'at kazeh hu noten matana al da'at sheyachzir. When there is such intimacy already between lender and borrower, we're not talking about lending money, we're talking about an object. If there's such intimacy between the lender and the borrower, that the lender is volunteering, he's there, he's milking the cow, he's working in your shed, if there's that relationship, when he lends you the cow, so let us imagine the Reuven is working in my barn and he's milking my cows. I say to him, would you lend me your cow as well and add it to my cows? We'll add it into the milk. He says, sure, he brings his cow along. That's kiruv dat. They're so close together. There's such cooperation that when he brings his cow, he's giving it to him as a gift. This is not a loan. This is gifting it for a period of time. Have my cow while I'm working with you. You have my cow. And since he didn't specifically say, I'm giving it to you on condition you give it back to me, what he means is, I'm giving it to you and you'll give it back to me when the day is over and the cows are milked, you'll give it back to me if it's around. And if it's not around, then it's not around, not nobody's problem. And he goes on, he says, even if you want to say that if you give a gift on condition that it will be returned, you're obligated for ones, this is different because there wasn't a t'nai. The idea of a conditional gift, like we do on Sukkot, when we give somebody a lulav and we say, on condition you give it back to me, which means if you don't fulfill the condition, this wasn't a gift to start with. That way the lulav never really becomes yours. But in this case, where he didn't specifically say, on condition you return it to me, says the Sforno, so there's no undoing of the gifting. The gifting was not conditional. There's an understanding that if the gift is not in existence anymore, you're not going to give it back to me. Of course not. But it's not a condition on the gift in a way that if the condition is not fulfilled, the gift becomes null and void. That's not what this is. So then, as long as it's in the hands of the receiver, in this case the borrower, it belongs to him. Even if he ends up not giving it back because it dies. He has no obligations of a shomer. It's his. And if it's your cow, you can be careless with your cow, you can damage your cow, you can do whatever you want to your cow. During this period of time, the cow is his because there is such intimacy, such collaboration between lender and borrower that we can assume it was given to him as a gift, not just as an item to be borrowed. That's what he says, and therefore there's no responsibility. My difficulty with this phono is, but what about it if I hire him? All right, if he's a sacher, then there's no cure of that. There's not intimate collaboration. If he's my employee, he's not a friend who came over and helped me milk the cows and brought his cows. I understand this phone is saying in that case, this is a gift, this is not a transaction. But what happens if it is a transaction? I've hired you, you're my employee, and we're milking cows, and I suggest that you bring your cow along. That doesn't mean that the cow is now mine because we're such close buddies. Because you're working for me as an employee. How does this phone work in the case of schirut? So then we move to the Bechor Shor. The Bechor Shor is a fascinatingly courageous Rishon. He's a talmid of Rabbeinu Tam. So Baal Tosfos goes back to Rabbeinu Tam as Rashi's grandson, the founder of the whole Tosfos movement, and the Bechor Shor is one of his talmidim. And what's fascinatingly courageous about the Bechor Shor is he explains the psukim without reference to the Gemara. Or he does refer to the Gemara, as you'll see here, but he's willing to explain the verses as they are literally. The Rashbam does something different. Rashi is completely different. Rashi's innovation is, when Rashi says, Lo bati ela lefarish kfi pshuto, I've come to explain the psukim, the verses of the Torah, in their simple way. He doesn't mean just simple. What he means is, in all the different interpretations given by Chazal in the Gemara and in the Medrash, I will take the one that seems closest to the simple meaning of the verse. And that's what I do, says Rashi. But the Rashbam, and more so the Bechor Shor, don't. They say, yes, this is what the Gemara says about it. This is what Chazal say about it. But if you just read and translate, that's not what it means. Which is quite amazing. And here's an example. He says, "Im בעליו עמו לא ישלם. לפי הפשט, אם עומדים בעלים על הבהמה והוא עצמו שומרה, הרי בשמירת בעליה ואשר פטור." He starts off like the Sefer HaChinuch. The owner is there, so it's his job to look after it. וכן אמר רב אמנונה ואיתוסי, and Rav Amnuna suggests that, and they reject him. ורבותינו אמרו, אפילו היה עמו בשעת משיכה אחרת פטור. וסברת הדין קשה. Even if he was there at the time of the Kinyan, even if it was in a different matter altogether, he's still patur, there's still no responsibility. But Svarat adin kasher, and this is difficult. When I saw the B'chol Shor, I thought to myself, well, I'm not the only one that can't understand this halacha. The B'chol Shor says it's very difficult. V'dikir daikir rabbanan, and it is in the words of the Torah, because it says ve'ein ba'alav imo, not ima. It says the owner is not with the borrower. It doesn't say the owner is not with the animal. So you see, the Torah doesn't require the owner to be with the animal at the time that it is damaged. The Torah merely requires the owner to be present at the time of the borrowing. So the Gemara is right. You see it in the words of the Chumash, even the way I interpret the Chumash. So how do you explain it? He has a different approach, and he says, if the owner is working for me, whether I've borrowed him or hired him, he's like a servant. That he's an employee, is like a servant. We have a din of kol ma shekana eved kana rabo. Whatever my servant owns during the period of his employ, I own. Now that's with a proper eved, and that's some of the difficulty of the B'chol Shor, because here this isn't an eved, he's not a slave. But there's an idea that there's a connection that since I own, Ruvain has sold his time to me. I've employed Ruvain. When I get Ruvain and his belongings. So when I say to Ruvain, do you mind bringing your cow over? I mean almost as part of your employment with me. So now it's my cow, the same as you working for me. Your cow is working for me, not for you anymore. That's how the B'chol Shor goes into it. And he says, and the same applies even with the case of a sachir, but it's difficult to see. And he learns this last part of the pasuk differently from the Gemara. It's quite amazing. But here you see a variation on the idea of the sforno, which covers the case of the sachir a little bit better. So I've hired you. When as my employee I ask you to bring your cow, I'm asking you as this becomes part of my estate. The same as during this time, you're part of my estate. I've bought your labor. I've also bought any property that can add to your labor. And therefore this belongs to me, and I don't have obligations to this. This is during this period of time, this is as if it's mine. But even that is difficult, isn't it? Because then Pshia, how does Pshia work? So now, does that enable me, based on the Rambam, that Pshia is mazik? Can I now go and destroy your cow? Of course I can't do that. So how can I even be posheya? If I'm negligent, that's as if I'm deliberately, actively damaging your cow. How can I do that? So even the B'chol Shor is difficult. So I wanted to suggest that what happens here is using a bit of their approach, the B'chol Shor and the Sifrono, but with a twist. And that is, when I've hired you, and then your cow comes with you, not the way the B'chol Shor wants to suggest. The cow comes to me. The cow belongs to me. I have ownership of the cow during this period of time. No, if I've hired you and you bring your cow, it's yours. It's your cow. And you and the cow are working for me. But the cow reports to you. The cow's part of your team, not my team. That's what happens when I employ you. You're there. Now it's like you bring your instruments, you bring your hammer, you bring your saw to do your work with. It's yours. I don't take responsibility to take care of it. So I'm bringing the cow in. The cow comes under your umbrella, not under my umbrella. And I found that then this morning actually said in the Shach. There's a fascinating Shach in Siman Samach Vav, a long Siman and a long Shach. And he talks about the method of psak, which is amazing in the first paragraph, not directly related to what we're talking about. But then when he says his hainu taima dikra, the reason for the posuk is בעליו imo lo havale shomer alav. When the owner is engaged, the borrower is not a shomer, klal. Ela havale ke'inish de'alma. He's like a stranger in relationship to the cow of the owner of the cow who's working for the borrower. So exactly the opposite of what the B'chol Shor wants to say. It's not that when you bring your cow in, your cow now becomes mine. No, when you bring your cow in, your cow remains yours. I have no responsibility towards it, even though I'm using it, but I'm using it as part of your team, not as part of my team. And we see from there, in this whole understanding here, is the linkages that he comes together with the cow, that the cow is part of his team. We are linked to our belongings. and our belongings are linked to us. And that's this whole understanding is, where does the cow, what is the metaphysical link of the cow? Is it to which owner? Is it to the person borrowing the cow, or is it to the person who owns the cow? Where's the metaphysical link? Because there isn't an energetic metaphysical link between a human being and their belongings. And we see that clearly in the Mesilas Yesharim, when the Mesilas Yesharim says at the end in Kedusha, כללו של דבר עניין הקדושה הוא שיהיה אדם דבק כל כך באלוקיו עד שבשום מעשה שיעשה לא יפרד ולא יזוז מהם יפרד. If a person is always linked to Hashem, עד שיותר יתעלו הדברים הגשמיים אשר ישמשו לאחד מתשמישיו במה שהוא משתמש בהם ממה שיורד הוא מדבקותו ומעלתו בהשתמשו מדברים גשמיים. Says the Mesilas Yesharim, an amazing Kabbalistic idea which quantum mechanics is just beginning to explore. There is an invisible but indelible connection between a person and their belongings. But it's an energetic connection. It's not a static connection. Your belongings can pull you down to their level so that you can become an object, you can become a chefza, you can become a thing that is affected, that is acted upon, that isn't active but is passive. Or you can elevate your belongings using that connection, that energetic connection between you and belongings. You can be ma'aleh, you can elevate your belongings to higher levels of kedusha by using them in that way. And that whole section of the Mesilas Yesharim explores that relationship. How if a human being is an Adam Kadosh, if a human being is a holy being, then his usage of material objects elevates the objects into holiness. If a person is not, then the objects diminish the individual from being human, so to say, to also being objects that are just functions of the environment. To understand that connection that we have, we are energetically connected to the things we own. And that's why there's the idea of Yeush. When you've lost something, when have you given up that connection? If you pick up something that somebody else has lost, is it still connected to that owner? You don't want to have something in your house which is connected to somebody else. Who knows who that person is? You don't want that connection. So you want to be sure that that person has relinquished connection. It's the idea of a kinyan and gemirut da'at. The person has to relinquish connection before they can transfer. This is not just laws of justice. This is not just commercial laws of how to transact. These are laws of how to acquire attachment and to relinquish attachment, because that attachment can bring a person down, God forbid, or that attachment on the other hand, as the Mesilas Yesharim explains, can elevate a person to the highest of levels and elevate the object to the highest of levels.